What's up, guys? Day 3, daily recording, gotta do it. So I actually have not updated too much, or at least I haven't done a lot of work since last time, but I did do some quick, interesting little hacks just to show off some of the potential of this. It literally took like 2 minutes right now just to have a little something new to show. And I figured that it's easy. I usually use my laptop and then I upload the current state of the project to my PC to record. And it's easy for me to do like little experiments on the PC, just messing around with the numbers of, whatever. And I can mess around with the player speed and shooting, all this stuff. So if I don't have anything really new to show, then I'll probably just do a quick experimental edit on the code that'll be overwritten the next time I upload from my laptop to PC. But that's at least something to have slightly new content to show off every day when things are kind of when I'm working on something that isn't apparent. So let's see, and by the way, I feel a lot better than yesterday. So this is the ideal to have a nice clear head, be productive. So what I did was I had the colors rotate through. I mean, it's kind of ugly because they're just kind of rolling through the whole hue map and they're not synchronized really. So when you enter these, now I have it that it changes your movement mode. So you'll see I'm kind of floating like in space and there's not really an up direction. When I move out, it just snaps back to the other one. Now later, if I keep something like that, then I'll have a smooth transition from one to the other. It's smooth going in here, but when you change your orientation too much and then go out of it, like over here, it'll snap you back to the Z up or snap back. Anyway, so yeah, going in these means you are now in a 0G movement mode that basically doesn't keep a specific up vector. So you could literally rotate around as if you were in space, where when you're out here, the up vector always stays the same. Just a little experiment, and I still have obviously the enemy spawning while you're in this, so whatever. So this is just a little interesting experiment showing that some of these spheres could simply change the whole dynamic of gameplay. Where now this is a mode I've had enabled for available for a while, but now it's literally part of the game, but only in these spheres. Now obviously it seems like most of the area is sphere, so if I kind of shoot up, let's see, try to gain some momentum it's not gonna work. And I have an idea how to stop that snapping, like when you go between them, you'll see, yeah, right there. It's pretty simple, it's just a really tight disappearing curve, so you can't see that transition right there. That actually fix a lot of the popping. So okay. And yeah, so I guess the way the algorithm is right now is, well, within this certain height, you're always going to be, okay, now I'm out of the spheres. I'm still jumping, so I can sort of fly. But yeah, so you could literally fall into one of these spheres and there could be movement modes a lot cooler than that 0G. That's just a quick experiment. Speaking of movement modes, I have another one to show off. And I think I can switch movement modes in here. No, I can't. It won't let me. So let me get back to a... Just looking for a good place to test. Okay, this is a good place. So I have... Did I disable it? Crap. I disabled it. Never mind. Oh, I know what's going on. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I'll show you next time. I have it hard coded to this because of the changes to the spheres with movement. So anyway, yeah, nothing too fancy. Just playing. So actually, a good thing to talk about is now I have to really think about how these spheres are going to be incorporated in the gameplay. You know, I obviously said that I'll have them spawning enemies, but you know, what are the detailed versions of that? What is the long-term, you know, what here could add to the progression or to the experience aside from just spawning? What are the whole details of how these spheres work, not just current implementation or something simple. So I'll be figuring that out today and hopefully starting working on that. I'll change them all back to a single color, or at least within a certain color range, because it's a little too funky. And there's also some other ideas I have for how to draw the spheres that are pretty interesting. I might experiment with that, but I don't know how much time it'll take right now. See, what I'm trying to do, the overall strategy is to get something. I usually call it a pass. I'm doing the first pass on this type of gameplay. Well, it's not actually the first pass, but we'll call it that. And you know, just something simple enough to express that feature, but it doesn't have to be visually refined, and there's room for more gameplay refinement. Sorry, my cat's letting me know something. So I'll generally be doing, you know, a sort of easier, simpler version at first, and you know, do that with combat, do that with whatever other features I'm adding, and then later I'll do another pass, at least on the graphics, where I do something that will be much closer to the final version, and where appropriate I'll do another pass on the gameplay ideas. So yeah, but this mode is interesting. Actually, I wish I could turn off spawning. No, I need to change the way this works. So these things, whatever. I don't need to explain the technical. See, I like this weapon, the concept of it, because it's strong, and it actually affects your movement. The idea is that you're like doing you know, your character is releasing a powerful shot at the end of this. But obviously these have a lot of HP. Or maybe those don't take as much damage from this type of shot, I forget. Anyways, I want to talk about this movement mode. This movement mode is pretty interesting in that it literally turns the map from something that has gravity and up direction to there's content in space. You know, there's no up direction. And for a while I was thinking if I wanted my game to actually have that as the main mode, and I died. Okay, but I don't think that's not really. There's too much too many downsides to that. So I just figured I'll keep a normal, you know, more standard movement mode as the norm, especially when it comes to, like, you know, I eventually want real base building where you lay out machines and whatever else, and it's kind of funky to maneuver around in a mode like this to place machines. And maybe if I, you know, improved it, made it a little more responsive. But I could see this mode, you know, like this. What I really wanted was these, you know, these spheres actually act a lot like, you know, they're another idea of this. Let's see, do I have it here? Yeah, this mode. Let's see, is this working? Okay. Yeah. Do these damage the enemy? They do damage the enemy. Okay. Oh yeah, and then my up direction. It's kind of interesting. You can see the weapon change depending on where you're looking. Okay, I'm gonna get away from this because there's way too many enemies. Yeah, but these spheres, you know, that mode I just showed you, again, the mode 1, or, yeah. This little cooldown mode, which I talked about in the first video, this can be nearly equivalent to what happens when you're in a certain type of sphere. So one is just a cooldown based change of mode, and the other is a location based change of mode. And they can both do the same stuff. They can set a certain weapon, a certain movement mode, spawn enemies or not, slow down the game, etc., etc. And I haven't really done any examples of that yet, but that'll be in the near future. So, you know, so these, yeah, so they can conceptually be thought of in the same way almost, but obviously one is always with you, and one is, you know, these spheres, you might have certain spheres that only appear, you know, once you travel really far. So there's obviously different dynamics there. And just dig down. You see all these textures. They're all just kind of randomly, you know, I got an assortment. I just kind of placed them all, not caring what they look like, just to experiment with what textures looked decent. So this one's a little interesting. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of, basically what these two mode changers allow me to do is to really experiment with gameplay. You know, to not lock me. Okay, obviously. See, this is kind of cool. This is you're in an enclosed space, and it shows off more of the physics. I would like for it's harder for them to spawn in closed space just because of the way it's working right now. They can, obviously. Oh. If I do this, it's a little too much for that. I'd love to change back to my normal movement mode here, but that's impossible. Okay, but at least if I'm in a corner here, then it's easier for me to deal with enemies. Obviously. Okay, I need to... Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna dig straight down, and eventually I'll be out of this sphere. And I'll know when I have normal gravity. There we go. So I'm out of sphere. And enemies won't spawn, so nice. So we can talk a little bit. Alright, I know this is a longer video, but, you know, hey, when I have ideas I want to share, I don't really care. It's like, you can stop watching. I'll usually do the cool updates at the beginning of the video, but if you want more of the detailed thoughts on, you know, where it's going and what can be done, that'll be later in the video. So for those interested, so yeah, I wanted these modes so I can experiment with different types of gameplay that might be overpowered or just not make sense. But if you're only in this, if you're only allowed to do a certain mode or weapon, or, you know, dynamic between you and the enemies or you and the world, if you're only allowed that for a, you know, a certain cooldown period or in a certain space in the map that could be rare, it could be costly as far as a cooldown, then that won't really affect the game too much, in that it'll show you, it'll be, you know, so you'll have experimental modes, and who knows how far we can go with that. But that really was the right answer to, you know, oh, I want some sort of standard to this game, which is, you know, probably going to be a lot like this movement. That isn't too out there, that people are familiar with, and it's just kind of natural. But I do also, you know, I made more than just that 0G mode. There's one or two other modes I want to incorporate at some point. But I do want people to have the potential to use these modes and to experience them in some way, and just to show off, you know, the real potential of new movement modes without having the player need to fully commit to them. And modes and weapons and, you know, whatever else. There could be an area that allows you, or a cooldown a mode, we'll just call them modes, whether they're activated by cooldown or by an area. There could be an area, there could be a mode that changes your weapon loadout. So you're placing turrets, that you place healing turrets and damage turrets, and the enemies start moving slower, and then they start attacking only your turrets, and you can heal them or whatever. And so now, for some time, and those turrets can remain there after the cooldown, or you know, the way you change between that cooldown and the normal mode is still something to think about. But okay, there's an enemy there, I guess. But these, you know, that sort of gameplay will fundamentally change how you interact with enemies in this game. And perhaps it could be that a huge area of the normal map, like a sphere that's like 1,000 blocks wide, will force that sort of gameplay. So, and maybe it'll have unique rewards at the center of it, and you know, so that'll be, you know, you're playing a new sort of class of the game, or even, you know, a new game type in a light way, for, you know, for the duration of your stay in that mode. So, and that's not too hard to do. I think that's something that's interesting. That'll kind of give this, you know, I don't really want to lock a player into a strict sense of the gameplay here. This isn't meant to be a, you know, a hyper skill based evaluator. You know, it's meant to, yeah, have your skill come into play, but not take away the variety and experimental stuff you can do, even though it might reward you, or it might make things easier or harder or whatever. So anyways, that's enough ranting. Just wanted to share some thoughts on that, and a good way to start my day with my video game dev vlog. So tune in tomorrow. Every day, we are here every day updating this stuff, and so I have to do a lot of work today. So tomorrow you have some cool new stuff to look at. But I think the earlier part of the day will be actually figuring out how I'm going to use these new modes, and especially for spawning enemies, because I want to get that locked down. And then once I have a decent setup of that, then I'll be going into the player combat part of that. So your own little cooldown, modes, etc., and some other dynamics between you and the enemy, which aren't really in there yet. And by the way, this is just a side note. This is a world map. So we are throughout. No matter how far you go here, this is in this world. And I don't know if I'm actually going to use this in the final game, at least in any serious way. But you know, this just shows the potential. I used to have portals, like if you got too close to one of these or whatever, then you'd teleport to, you know, in one direction to the next world, somewhere in there. And so you could, you know, you can conceivably have a 2D map of worlds, infinite worlds, but obviously the just the complexity of which determined by the generator function. And we'll talk about generator functions in detail when we start messing with those at some point. So just a little interesting thing here, and I had like numbers to denote the levels of what they were. And maybe some resources are more prominent in some worlds, and you could set up portals between blah blah blah. So I don't know if I'm actually gonna use that at all in this game, but just another thing I can set up. And there's still other things I'm not showing here, but I'm not sure if they'll actually be part of the first release of the game. I really want to, and I think, you know, to actually get some of these things working properly, it'll take more time than I want right now. One of those is multi-block entities. So I can let's see, I can place like more than that. I think I can also place some of these. Yeah, let's try one of those. Storage. Okay, so obviously I can place a light, and that's an entity. This entity doesn't take up space. It doesn't block you. Let's see. I hope the game doesn't crash, because I don't know if these are still working. Okay, storage. So this storage, this isn't a block like a normal block. This is actually its own thing. It could you know, rotate or change shape because it's not a static piece of geometry. So you have these storage blocks. Actually, this is pretty cool to show. This was for another system that it isn't really important anymore. but just to show off the concept that these things, let's see, oh yeah, so storage. Oh, this works. Never mind. Okay. So if I'm pressing E on them, so obviously you can tell that I'm storing. These are all the blocks I dug up. So I'm storing things in here, and similarly, and I can probably store a battery, an entity. So you can see these are actually like just storage chests. Though I think they also interacted with other entities. This is a 1 by 1 by 1 block, but I could have an entity that's defined as a 3 by 3 by 3, and not just as a cube, but I could actually have a certain piece of geometry defined for that. And what it would do is it would place that geometry, and you could in the code you could scale it, so you could just do a simple sphere or whatever, and then have it be 20 by 20. And what it would do is it would go through that. It would go through all that geometry, and anywhere the geometry crosses a block, it would block out that space. So basically, it would make a structure that you couldn't walk into, just like this, but in a larger way, and using non-voxel geometry. So there's a lot of potential there, but then you have to mess around with rotating and this and that, and those sort of geometry things can have one block connections. Like imagine let's see, if I just dig out some of this, let's pretend this is a 3 by 2 by 3 entity, and I could have a certain type of connection there and a certain type of connection there, and then I could start placing these storage blocks to link it up, just like in other games you have like energy and item transfer, and you can do something similar with this, but it would work a bit differently, because this just kind of shows a little, just a very early thing of and these entities will obviously be aware of what it's next to, and they will maintain, or they can, if they're done right, and I talked about this earlier, they can maintain their presence even when you walk away from them when you're in some other part of the map in the world. They will maintain some sort of presence, so if they're doing something like processing some material into something else and then transporting it to something else, that can all still happen in the background. It won't happen it won't be updated every frame necessarily, especially when you have many elements, but that can still happen. And so you could, to connect to my favorite game, you could literally, if you put enough time and energy into it, you can make something that's like Factorio in this world, or like the modded Minecraft where they do a lot of automation stuff. But this is more built with the idea that it's not going to necessarily be precisely calculated, but because of the way it works, it will be very scalable to the point where you don't need, you're not gonna run into CPU performance issues as early as you would in these other games. So, but that's a whole other conversation. I think I've talked enough. I think I showed enough. So that's that. That's just another day in the game dev world, and obviously there's still slight bugs with physics, but that'll be easy to fix. So, all right, I'm out. Peace.